So I'll start. Start making some introductions with Adam and myself. So we'd like to have this conversation, and thank you all for joining us. We talk about how to elevate their community and elevate our city. This year's theme for our organization as we do. But first, if we've not met, my name is Aaron Story. I'm the president and CEO of Elevate Indianapolis. Have been here with the organization for coming close on 6 years, and have been, as I shared in the chat, been in Indianapolis since 2001. Spent my whole life in Indiana, and so it's Hoosier by nature, as they say, and have been here in the city for quite a few years now. So, Adam
Johnson, newly titled Chief Program Officer, previously Chief Relationship Officer, but now also duties have not really changed other than over all the programs now, which is our mentoring, sports and adventure, in school, and most of you familiar with me as that's primary over the Pathways to Purpose College and Career Programming area. Born and raised here in Indianapolis, but I've also lived in Atlanta for a couple of years, in New York for a couple of years. Graduated from IUPUI, Pui, which now is no longer IUPUI, I presume, I think.
Soon enough.
But I was on the IU side, degree in public affairs with an urban affairs concentration. So glad to be here, glad to be part of Elevate, which I've been a part of since October of 2019. And glad all you are here as well.
Adam, is one of the things we like to do for a lot of our staff meetings and in general is start with who we're celebrating. So one of the things we always try to do is center our conversations on celebration and on student success or staff success in some cases too. Who comes to mind? And we'll kind of move into our conversation, but let's maintain protocol here too.
What immediately comes to mind is I've been able to, I'm not in the classroom as I used to be as when I first started as frequently, but I've been able to visit the George Washington 3A class, which is an intro class, freshman. And watching them the couple of times I've been in the classroom at this early part of the school year, just their growth and buy-in right off the bat. From day one to now, which maybe 4 or 5 classes they may have participated in, how when they first come in, there's a lot of reservation, a lot of hesitancy, but watching them grow enough to whereas I took them donuts Wednesday. Took them donuts.
We'll make friends. Here. Yeah.
Right. But good group of students in that classroom. We're going to definitely have some really heavy hitters coming out of that cohort in that particular class. But we're just watching their buy-in now, watching how engaged they are. We have a student, we hadn't even taught some of the Elevate ways yet. And when she was called upon to answer a question, she stood up and answered it and then sat down, which is, the Elevate way. And we hadn't gotten to that yet, but she's setting a tone. And several of the students are really setting a good tone in the class.
That's great. Yeah, I'll go. One of the things I'm excited about in this season is, as we talk around here, is we have hired a couple of alumni, students that have been through our program in high school, and either Niana, who graduated in college in May, or Mariana, who's in college still, are now working with Elevate. And that's a lot of fun just to see them now co-laboring for the work for this next generation of students. And so that's been a lot of joy to kind of see some of that materialize from our labor the last, now coming up on 9 years as an organization. Adam, one of the things that we'll just go back to first, we kind of ground our conversation in our mission, as we say a lot, but we're here to build long-term life-changing relationships with Indianapolis youth, equipping them to thrive and contribute to their community. And we think about this long-term, model. We think about relationships long-term, and you like to, and you'll get a chance to talk about this here in a little bit too. You like to talk a lot about the measure of our success being our alumni, and what that means in general, because that's where the thriving and contributing we need to see occurs in our city. And I think that really helps set a tone for our theme this year in general. But I wanted to share our 7 areas of holistic wholeness, what we consider where we're going to see thriving, contributing in what areas in general, kind of refresher for those that are live on the conversation, those that will watch this later as we publish this out. Our 7 areas: intellectual, social, physical, financial, spiritual, vocational, and emotional. So we think about the whole human, the whole person in this long-term life-changing relationship. And so what's thriving, contributing look like in a wholeness of it? So ideally not just one area that's strong and the other areas are weak, or 2 areas and vice versa, but we think about slats in the barrel a lot. The water can only rise to where the lowest slat is, the barrel, and that's really is the kind of the anchor of our model. Is we want to see whole growth in all areas. A couple of things this upcoming year we're excited about, and we're really investing deeply in, and for some of our guests, and I thought we could kind of jump into this conversation for you and I, and hopefully get some participation from some of our guests on as well. Obviously, so for many of our supporters who've been following along, our College Common Core expansion is our partnership with IPS. Started our first cohort at Tech in January, that collaboration between us and IPS and Ivy Tech. That first cohort of 30. So now those students are in an Elevate intro class. So now they're cohorted in another Elevate class. But then January, we start that second cohort, too. So cohort 2, well, and as Adam, as we spent significant time working, planning, discussing how to help see these students be successful, what's it look like from a staff support, from a program support. But also we launched Shortridge a couple weeks ago. So we're 2 full weeks into Shortridge High School and our first class there, and our staff there are just doing great. And we've got our own classroom, and that's been neat to see pictures and hear stories already. Too, we're really anchoring in on just what's it look like for systems and processes for us as we expand our programs, but as we spend in, as Adam and our leadership team, and hours and hours and hours of process conversations kind of every week to discuss what's it look like for us to make sure we can be consistent, as we'll talk about. So if you visit McDonald's in Oklahoma versus McDonald's in New York, we want the fries to stay the same, the burgers to stay the same. Well, within our pipelines of our four high school pipelines, we want to make sure that we're handling things similar and the same as well, from operations to our different high school works too. So we're spending a lot of time on just process growth and improvement as we're establishing this EOS model. As you think about anything, Adam, as you think this kind of upcoming year in review, that's kind of, whether it's just a small bullet point that's getting a lot of your time as you think about the year ahead, anything come to mind before we jump into our conversation as a whole?
In that context, I think you kind of alluded to it as well with our alumni and what it's going to look like for them to be successful, and then backpedaling from there to understand what it's going to take for our seniors to be successful, then our juniors and our sophomores, then our freshmen. As I'll talk about the freshman cohort that's coming in now, I think we have 4 different intro classes which are catered to our freshmen. Just thinking through when we talk about our holistic will in those 7 areas, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, how do we come alongside them, how do we create programming that's going to strengthen those areas to help them find success and be successful, and even in some instances greatly define success. For each has a different definition of what success is going to look like for them during this high school journey. So great focus on one-on-ones and small group mentoring is going to be a great focus this particular in this season here. And at some given point in time, I can tell you exactly what we're looking at doing with those one-on-ones and small group opportunities that we have.
Yeah, it's good. That's good. That's right. That's been a big conversation the last few months. As we get into the kind of shifting to our theme here of elevating their community, elevating our city, we would love to see questions or dialogue around this, whether it be live, or they'll be in the chat room. As what's it look like for you to share as guests that are on there, share your feedback and your thoughts on this. And then obviously when we post this video out, we'll make on social media, we'll make the comment sections live too. We want to help shape this conversation, get feedback to our community. We want to make sure we understand how the community sees elevating their community, our city as well, and specifically folks that are partnering with us, with a business or businesses or individuals or community groups or churches, as we've had as well. So drop questions in, or drop discussion points or your feedback, in too. As we think about this theme for this year, as I was thinking, just adding even back to kind of COVID in 2020, obviously you've been on the staff for just really 6 short months there, and then we took just a massive pivot. But really, in our 8 years, one of the last 6 years that I've been here, kind of every year there's been a theme. And then really every year we've had to look at what's it look like for us to make, to make a pivot to reflect the season that we're in, to do a fresh reflection of our students and where they're at, what's it mean to serve them, what's the community interest, where are the school dynamics at, because obviously our school partners that we work with, that we don't do this without them. But I think obviously in COVID, for example, we maintained our core model, but we pivoted to increase more direct relief efforts, more social emotional supports. We got creative in our college and career work. How do we do college and career mentoring during COVID? Well, we still had significant hours, but it looked different. And even every year since then, it's been the same. As we look at what season are we in, we're now in our fifth school year at Washington, which is mind-numbing to think. We're in our second year at Purdue Poly, right, 9th year at Tech. Well, those schools have endured quite a bit of change, specifically Washington and Tech, as IPS, the collaboration of schools have shifted and changed. Well, you have to change with it. With this year's theme, we think about how to elevate their community, how to elevate our city. Adam, when this comes to mind, from thinking of all the pivots we've made over the years, what comes to mind initially for you, kind of a first flyover with this theme in general?
Elevating their community, a greater focus in our service learning. When I think about elevating their community, a large percentage of our students are going to remain in their community after high school. A large percentage of our students are going to have families and raise families in their community, their existing community. Sadly, many of them won't have the opportunity, even the option, let's say, to move out of the community if they wanted to, just because of the lack of resources. So with our focus on service learning, which is our volunteering opportunities, and oftentimes faith-based learning, service learning opportunities as well with those institutions. In order for their community to rise, to elevate, they're going to have to learn how to give back to their community and give back to the community that they live in. The community that 9 times out of 10 they're going to be in for most of their lives, if not the rest of their lives. And so with our focus in our service learning area, there's a joy, there's a life that goes along with giving back. If we can teach our students how to give back and make that just part of their lifestyle, that in and of itself is going to elevate their communities. So when we talk about elevate their community, elevating our city, it's great when they can go on and get a 2-year degree or 4-year degree and have the opportunity to leave the city, leave the state. But oftentimes, if a student leaves the state, the chances and probability of them coming back in the community which they live in, hence therefore the opportunity and the willingness to give back to that community, are somewhat minimal. So giving a focus to the students that probably are going to remain in their community, give them an opportunity to uplift the quality of life in their community, that's what's going to uplift their community and uplift the city. Because if they do not know how to give to the community, if we only make a change in the student and not in the community, then the community in and of itself won't rise.
Yeah, really talking about this holistic shift of mindset to investing in where you live, work, play, worship. What's it look like to look at your community as a young person emerging and see the assets there, see the strengths there, also see your stewardship responsibility of investing in where you live, both now and maybe, buy a home, put roots down, plant if you're going to live there. How do you make it the best community you can while you're there? And that no that that definitely, I think that gets into, imagine thousands of young people graduating our IPS high schools, seeing their neighborhoods as places to uplift and invest and to deepen, to become safer, thriving neighborhoods. Well, then that uplifts our whole city. Right? That's the very point. Their communities is our city, and it can be often easy to distance. Why I don't live in Hallville, or I don't live in the Near East Side or Martindale, or fill in the blank of whatever neighborhoods you don't live in. It's easy for our city to kind of think often that that's not my neighborhood. That's not, but it is your city. It is your city, and that really gets to helping us to think about that. As you know, Adam, and I've shared this with some communications well with our partners, at times. But one of the very first things we do with new staff, and it's something that I've done here with 90% of the staff the last 6 years, is the very first meeting is set on the corner of 10th and Rural. Well, I'll meet one-on-one usually at 9 a.m. their first day. And we stand on that corner and we have a discussion around looking at the neighborhood, looking at the community. And that specific corner, because that was identified as one of the neighborhood crime hotspots 6-7 years ago, as a study was done with kind of Brookings Institute, and that then the chief of police was involved in. And there's two of those corners of the 6 of the city in the 46201 neighborhood. But it really is just representative of this. How do we help our staff and our team always see that we don't actually exist for that classroom or for that school? We exist to help build healthy, thriving neighborhoods in our city. And we always discuss, and I always kind of hopefully help new staff to identify that if the work that you're doing, if the mentoring work that you're doing, if taking kids to camps or colleges or companies or all the, often the fun activities that we do, if it doesn't translate into building a healthier kind of built physical environment for that student's block, that student's neighborhood, their family, their siblings, their parents, if it doesn't translate in some way, then often our mentoring or our program is missing the mark. We want to see thriving neighborhoods, because those are, to your point, those are the neighborhoods our kids live in, and some will live in by their choice for a long time, right? Maybe forever, because that's their love for the city come from that neighborhood. And
it's a mind shift.
Yeah, go ahead.
And it's a mind shift, Aaron. They've grown up knowing and interacting and behaving in their neighborhoods in a certain way. It's the norm. It's what they come to know. And until someone comes along and challenges that mindset, it's someone, organization like Elevate or a Teacher Mentors, they're going to continue to do what they've been doing. I had a young man that was with me in a car one time. I had three young men in the car with me. We just got something to eat. Stopped at a light, and he proceeded to take his bag, ball it up, and throw it out the car window onto the ground. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, oh, what, Mr. Johnson? No, you need to get that. Well, it's just trash. But you hear that though? To him, it's just trash. And he's just throwing it in his neighborhood. But until they're challenged, they're going to continue to think, or could continue to think, that that's acceptable, that's the norm, not understanding that what he's doing to his neighborhood is really perpetuating that which is already thought of inner city neighborhoods, as well as he goes and has a family. What is he teaching? What are values he bringing to his community when his kids see that, when a young man sees that? And so that's where the value of what we do really comes into play. Simple things. It's not necessarily all the vision trips that we do or the studies that we do and assessments and the college visits. It goes beyond that. It's showing and modeling to the young men and women that are in our lives on a regular, hence our students, what it looks like to be a thriving contributor in their community.
It's good. Yeah. And I was thinking of just we've had some conversations recently with a local group that of considering how do we get a handful of our staff to be ABCD certified, so asset-based community development certified. And to your point, seeing your neighbor as an asset, a lot of what can happen, incidental or on purpose, often is conditioning of our students to see their community as not an asset, and to see their neighborhoods as not an asset, because often what makes the news about the communities they live in is nothing but negative, when actually there's great assets in all of Indianapolis's neighborhoods, including the ones they live in. But if you're not conditioned or been trained, or your mindset to think that, how is my neighborhood rich in assets? And so we're looking at trainings this year for many of our staff to go through that, so we can make sure we integrate that mindset in all of our programs just naturally. So when, to your point, that mentoring conversation in a car ride, which we talk a lot about, one of the unique things of our model is the level of life on life relationship that happens even in windshield time. Right? You happen to be you wouldn't have done that in the classroom, right? If our program was just simply in classes, or if it was just in college visits or fun, those road trips, to your point, like that, you miss those opportunities to do that, life on life windshield time, which is often sometimes the most impactful mentoring that occurs, that maybe they're not aware of it, but it is, because you're thinking about mindset shifting.
It's impactful.
That's right.
Yeah.
Including, like, that's not from a lesson plan, to your point. That happens because there's a relationship there established and you're in place.
So with that, so I can let me button up that situation. So I told him, we're not moving until you get it. For real, Mr. Johnson? Yes, we're going to sit right here until, Mr. Johnson. Yes, oh, Mr. Johnson. So he got out and got it, and we had a great rest of the day. But that's what it takes.
No, that's good. I think for me, the theme, it addresses, it's us making sure that our model, to our point, talks about, addresses those assets, and helps our students to grow up in a community that they see, that we see their communities as assets, and that we see them as assets in general. And a lot of our youth, specifically a lot of our young Black youth and a lot of our young minority youth, are often not treated and seen as they're the assets in our community. Right? And their schools often aren't treated that way. And so we want to make sure that's just a natural part of Elevate. I mean, it is, but we want to even continue to say, what does it look like in 2023 to see these young students, their schools, their neighborhoods, and then they would invest and treat it like that for the long term, long after, as you and I talk all the time, long after they're out of Elevate, when they're alumni. And maybe that young man, to your point, is then he's 23, now, when he's talking to his friend, like, hey, we don't throw trash out. You don't throw our trash out the window now. We care about our neighborhood, right? Because it's where we're living and it's where we're putting down roots and, whatnot. But I think also for us this year, is this theme makes me think about just dealing with issues of the proliferation of poverty, which, I think of 6-7 years ago, when I first came on 6 years ago, I just think about the studies that were done then. And I think we're in such a different place now as a city that, unfortunately, we don't see that it's changed a whole lot in terms of economic upward mobility has not gotten much stronger for the students that we serve, short of, unfortunately, despite all the lack of resources out there. So what's it look like for us to make sure that our programming is reflective of this? And then also helping our donors and supporters become advocates of their communities. Obviously, we work with a lot of folks, partners and companies and donors and supporters that are great believers of Elevate and our students, but don't realize sometimes the power of their advocacy that is much more powerful than what you or I, Adam, or our program will ever be able to do. The amount of doors that can be opened and bridges that can be built from companies and partners and donors to be advocates for our young people that we know addresses poverty long-term for the students that we serve. And which builds healthier neighborhoods, right? Which then in turn builds a healthier and safer city, which is what we all want, to live in too. Adam, when you think about this, what is a concern of yours about some of our students in this season? So kind of the opposite of this theme is, we think this is rich and positive opportunity for us. But then what concerns that you're seeing in kind of 2023 from the last couple of years that is concerning, for you, for what our students endure, what they're going through, that we could kind of make the kind of observing audience here be aware of? Does anything come to mind?
So this is where you want to go with it. But right now, what I'm seeing, experiencing with a lot of students right now is the thought of trying to get by with doing little. The mindset of why should I do more if I can do less and still get the same result? So I think there's a lack of appreciation, um, or hard work isn't valued as much. Um, we're getting students into our classrooms with wanting to do bare minimums and expecting to still receive exceptional results. I honestly think that you mentioned COVID earlier. I think COVID perpetuated that a lot. That not necessarily well, let me say, we have a lot of students in our high schools now that their seventh and eighth grade year was not even carried out in a formal school setting. And so when given the demographics that we work with, then we have parents either not engaged and involved or parents working 2 and 3 jobs, as well as siblings then watching younger siblings and not engaging. Or if you look at our school districts, students initially didn't have electronic devices to tap into schoolwork, whether it was a laptop or Wi-Fi or whatever. And hence, then you have a students coming from seventh and eighth grade into high school. So we're talking about now our freshmen and sophomores, which are struggling with putting forth the effort, really conceptualizing how much work is really required to be successful. So when we think about our mission statement, thriving contributors, thriving, getting them to thrive now is of utmost importance, and them understanding how much work it's going to take for them to thrive and to be successful. So I think a big focus of ours right now is definitely will be coming alongside of them to help them understand that everything's not going to just be hand delivered to them on a silver platter, but they're going to have to work for the grades that they receive and not get typically they were getting 50% for not turning in anything. They would literally get a 50% just for being present.
Breathing air.
Which I think has really,
yeah.
Yeah. So that shift in the classroom, coupled with then what we can do with them outside of the classroom and continue to mentoring them and giving them a better understanding of what life is really like. And there's no participation grades alone that's going to carry you into being successful. That greatly concerns me. Coupled with now, so you have a lot of students that probably are not as well as equipped to pass some of the tests that are required for them to graduate. That really concerns me. So I think that we have a lot of work ahead of us to do to ensure that our students, the students that we serve, really do experience success.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I think about you're referencing really a few years ago, and a couple of year period there, and I think because societally, maybe medically, societally, we're moved on, right, quote unquote, past COVID, which is true, generally speaking, right. But then you have this lagging impact of, well, now the next season is hindered by that 2-year season. College students now that were students we invested in, or students, well, if you had a period where you were able to kind of be passed along, but weren't really able to get the same depth of quality, but experience, education, holistic investment, that lag does have still an effect. It's overcomable for certain, but we have to name that it's there, and students have to be aware of that. As I think about our alumni and some of their challenges in college, often comes from that. But I think one of the things I was going to say earlier, to kind of maybe to counter that, is we've experienced, I think, the last couple of weeks, too, in our classes, but I've heard this in other nonprofits and other schools, strong engagement the last month. I hear about a lot of nonprofits had strong summer engagement, full rosters, whereas a couple of years there, the last couple of summers, a lot of other nonprofits talk about, half their spots were filled from their spots. There just wasn't a lot of apathy was carrying over from COVID. There wasn't engagement in those summer opportunities, or there wasn't engagement in school. We saw strong engagement this summer, and I talked with a lot of other nonprofit friends. They did as well. Kind of back to numbers post COVID from a percentage of engagement standpoint for a lot of folks. But I've heard about that with back to school over the last few weeks. And I think we've felt pretty strong about attendance and engagement participation compared to maybe the last couple of years where it was still this. You still see the lingering effect of living off pajama pants and Crocs and all of that, right? Because they got used to being from home, and that some trends may die slow, but we're seeing more of that, and so hopefully that's something we can build on as an organization, as our mentoring to build on that, deeper effort of engagement. But you're right, you have to, to your point, it is a concern of ours that, you can move the ship, you can guide the ship if it's moving, right? And so you've got to have a moving ship to guide. But that's good. Adam, we shift from students and program focus when you think about partners, whether it be, companies and our community engagement partners, or in general, as you think about it, because obviously we want to exist in collaboration in general, and that's a big part of our student success, is their ability to connect with partners. And then we go back to this theme of elevating their community. We know economic upward mobility ultimately is everything, right? And that has to come. That has to have the strengths and assets to come through middle school and high school, but it's exhibited and lived out after high school. So after they're graduate high school and moving on, is when they start to experience that economic mobility, right? Or don't. And so what do we want to see from partners this year? And maybe it's what we've seen in years past. What are those success stories what is it going to take for successful collaboration from area businesses to help kind of join in this mission as you see it, to elevate their community as students in general, as we think about these challenges and these successes of the young assets of our kids? Anything come to mind?
So what I placed in, it's funny you asked that, because what I placed in the chat was, I think we're seeing a higher number of community partners that are genuinely interested in investing in our young people. So with that though, with that genuine interest though, I think the reality that our students have been gravely under resourced and represented is huge for our partners to understand. I think it's important to, I would say, almost a patience, and then a concerted effort in developing programming which is catered to the students that we serve. Understanding that, for instance, I'll just say, for instance, a vision trip, whereas a normal vision trip in general may consist of us going to a community partner's place of employment, presentation, some food, and then a tour, and ideally a hands-on experience. To say that on the surface is easy, but once you put that in context, so we need partners that want and desire to understand the context of what we do, because that student that may have attended this particular vision trip may have lived on 42nd and Post, but going to George Washington High School. So school starts at 7 o'clock. Student was probably up at 5:30 a.m. There's a great chance that student had to help get a sibling together as well, or watch the sibling into the evening because mom didn't get home till 11:30 p.m., 12 from work. So then that student goes way across town to be in class. And this truth of the matter is that the schools we're in can be somewhat volatile, to say the least. So the learning environment isn't really conducive to learning, nor success oftentimes. And then lunch is like, it's high school lunch, right? It's nothing to write home about. But then we meet with our students
not
after
Takis and
school.
ramen. It's not Takis and ramen. That's what you're saying. It's, that's the
There it
famous
is.
one.
Exactly. So this student's been up since 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m. And now we're asking them to come meet us after school in the classroom at 2:30 so that we can be at this place of business at 3 p.m. And then by the time the vision trip is over, great trip. But one thing to understand is our partners, we need to understand, like, we have to feed them because they're not going to get home until 6:37 p.m. And so what we do is prior to, setting up vision trips with our community partners, we try to sit down and just explain what the type of student in their environment, in their mindset, what who's coming to your place of business, because we've had partners that would prefer just to sit and talk to the students for 2 hours. And it's great information, but that student is worn out, tired, a little exhausted, and the like, and probably won't be as engaged in a setting such as that. So to have partners that really understand our students, the challenges that our students face, goes a long way, because every single partner, I would say this, every single partner that we have right now that we're partnering with ask personally, between me and Ms. Aiken, they ask us, how can we best serve your students? Those are the type of partners we need. Those are the type of partners we try to seek out, and that we try to gain deeper relationships with, because we understand they get it. It's not about a photo op. They actually get it and they care, and they'll invest even if they don't see the fruit of their investment. They understand that what they're doing, what they're providing long term is going to have a great impact in their students' lives. And that's important to us.
That's good. And I think you mentioned a number of things that I want to surface out. But I think one, that long-term piece is that we think about that long-term life-changing relationship. Our partners that do see fruit from it, ultimately directly, are folks that are seeing this as a 2 to 3 year minimum kind of window. What's it look like to collaborate, knowing that we bring students on vision trips every year. They can job shadow with you, maybe in the spring. We've done that before. You can sponsor a vision breakfast table. You can engage, so you can be around the organization, and around our students over the course of time. That will lead to fruit, often that fulfills mission statements, that helps our companies that we partner with to see, the realized value for them as well. But I think that long-term piece is, obviously critical to your mention too. And I think that student center.
And that's good, Aaron.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. But and that's critical. That's a critical piece too, because as we can get our students connected with these different community partners over a long period of time, and these students begin to understand the value of those relationships, our students can begin to rely less on us as they grow and mature through our program throughout their high school year, so that they have the connections and the relationships for themselves once they graduate and become alumni, and are not solely dependent upon Elevate staff and their teacher mentor to continue and develop their relationship for them. And that's vital.
Yeah. And then I know that's a big part of your philosophy of training in the program, is every year from freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, there's a weaning from reliance of Elevate is the goal. Obviously, we meet kids where they're at, some take longer than others, but that goal is by that senior year that they're engaging fully in all of our programming, but the reliance, on is less and less, because they're being more connected to the community, to strength businesses, agencies, community centers, knowing that when they graduate, we want to, once an Elevate, always an Elevate, but we want them to tap into the assets in our city, too. And I think about, we talked about this the other day, we have a couple of students that are Evans scholars, right now, that are in the caddying program on the north side. And the amount of folks that those young people are meeting, is going to lead to, as long as they, stay faithful and to fulfill their responsibilities. But the amount of folks and people that they're meeting within those opportunities will lead to a whole lot more potential upward economic mobility than just simply being in an Elevate program, do the stuff that we do. So we know our job is to be a steward and conduit to community partners of impact, because we're never surprised at the surprise of people. When people meet our students that we serve, we're never surprised how surprised they are. Like, yeah, we there's some great kids in this city and great young people in this city. They have dreams and hopes and visions, but you've got to meet them. You got to realize the potential of them, the asset that they could be. Every time we do a vision breakfast or a site visit, we always hear folks say, "Man, your kids are incredible." It's like, that's right, they are. You know, and it's not just because we're an Elevate. Obviously, there's great kids in the city that aren't, but we invest deeply in them, and so when they shine, people are always, as you know, blown away by that. But we want them to be connected to business owners, to business managers, to folks that make decisions in colleges for scholarships, for community foundations, knowing that those are resources for them, long term, for that long term life change that we're talking about, not just a long term relationship. We want a life change, which is going to elevate their community, to your point too. Let's start to wind down, Adam, and think about just kind of closing kind of comments as we think about, again, this collaborative approach with community members, whether it be businesses or individuals or churches or community neighborhoods or agencies in our city. What does advocacy look like? So, if you're not, as we talk about the language of called into this full time, what does meaningful advocacy look like that we really need those folks to partner with, that are for our students, to some of my comments earlier, but as you see it, what do our students need for them to be elevated in their community? What do they need from the city? From citizens in the city, businesses in the city, and as well. What comes by when you hear that?
Giving thought to that, oftentimes I think we have a lot of people in our community that may not have the resources themselves, but they know individuals or entities that do have resources. And I, oftentimes a community partner or someone in the community, an organization or something, thinks that it's all monetary, and it's not. Oftentimes, a lot of in-kind goes a long way. The opportunity for students to do job shadowing goes a long way. Internships go a long way for our students, especially with students that have not been in different settings, professional settings, job settings. That's huge for them to gain that exposure and that comfortability. Their confidence grows as a result of these experiences. So advocacy, as I see it, is really opening your doors and not necessarily always your pocketbook. It can be, don't get me wrong, but just the opportunity for students to be exposed to different experiences. We have a lot of students, for instance, if you take a tech company, technology company, many students that have visited different technology companies, such as Kainos, thought that all they did was computer programming. But until they're exposed to it, just like when we do site visits at our schools, where community partners come in and get to visit our classroom and see how our model really works, get to see our teachers in action and our students in action. Until they do a site visit, they don't fully comprehend exactly what we do sometimes, even though we may have explained it several times to them. They may have seen it on the website, but until they see it, it really doesn't click. And it's the same with our students. Until that student is in that setting, on that job, and experiencing it for themselves, they really don't fully conceptualize the opportunities that lie within these different businesses, organizations, and entities that we partner with. So I think advocacy looks like opening up your doors for these opportunities, but it also asking your neighbor to open up their doors for these same opportunities. And if that continues, then we'll have a lot of opportunities for our students to really experience life in a different way, in a way that they probably never thought existed. Because when our students experience life in a corporate setting, then they're also going to then have the ability to process that with a teacher mentor on the ride home, while going to get something to eat, sitting on their porch. Those opportunities, then the student has the comfortability to really maybe be vulnerable and share their thoughts, fears, and concerns with that experience and what their future looks like.
That's great. That's great, Adam. We can land the plane, with that as we talk. We see ourselves as advocates, and to help mobilizing advocates. We just ultimately are. There's a lot of brilliance and assets in our city we think are hidden gems that we don't want to be hidden anymore. So that our city can be this place that thrives. 2023 and well beyond our work. Too. So, thanks everyone for jumping in and listening and joining the conversation. We're going to put this out on our social platforms, and you can reach Adam at elevateindy.org. You can reach me at Aaron at elevateindy.org as well. Would love to keep this conversation going. Adam mentioned site visit. That's something we do once a month at any one of our schools across the city as well. We love to see the work in person, and you can experience it for yourself and help, be an advocate and bring some other friends with you, too. But thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. That was great. And thanks everyone for joining us on here, and hope to see and talk with you all soon.
Great.